We're on?
Yeah.
Okay, so good morning, everyone. I'm really happy to be in this EuroNPUD webinar, the third of a series of four called Peerworks. And yeah, really happy to see how the network has developed and is now able to show, you know, three webinars showing three peer-led interventions or community-led interventions. And you know, as the world is changing so quickly with these populisms and nationalisms and, you know, kind of getting back to an old narrative, I guess it's very, you know, good to see how things can be also balanced if we have the opportunity. In this webinar, we'll be, you know, showing cases of how peer work strategies of secondary needle and syringe exchange and material of consumption exchange and safe injection. So really glad to have Mats. Well, it's a great group of speakers. We have Southwell, that is our project manager of EuroNPUD, and is, you know, going to show the situation in Bath, and also is going to then talk about a surprise in the end. And we have also, you know, from Spain near Barcelona, our friends Antonio. Antonio is from CATNPUD, the Catalonian network of people using drugs. And we have also, you know, Emilia Piermartini that will be presenting the CASO recent developments. And we'll have Tom representing maybe one of the older drug user organization in function and in good function. And Christos from Greece. I don't know if you will share anything, but with no delays, because our friend Antonio maybe will have to leave earlier. And seeing this is one of the basic, you know, and long time ways that peers have showed society and professionals and politicians that we can go to places where no one else can. And without further delays, I would give the floor to our friend Antonio. Thank you, Antonio. Nice to see you.
Every nice to be here with the community of EuroNPUD. It's a pleasure and a little surprise for me because it's contacted yesterday, but it's okay. Just let me share my screen. Okay. Oh, I can't.
Maybe Ian, yeah, Ian from Correlation is supporting all this logistics with the technology.
I don't know, because yesterday I sent my presentation. Maybe he's able to display, because now my laptop can't reach the Zoom.
Just a second. Yes, I have a presentation from yesterday.
Oh, thank you. During this delay, let me introduce myself and my organization. I'm Antonio Jort. I'm an activist from Catalan network of people who use drugs. And it's a pleasure to share with you today a project that has been in operation since 1999. It's a mechanical syringe machine within in the street, and is managing 7% by drug users. Okay, the next slide, please. This is from Reus. It's a little town near Barcelona. Next slide. This is ARSUS, it's a network of drug users, which is now part of NSP, but ARSUS started activity in 1999 and developed until now like a network who is part of EuroNPUD and NSP as well. Next slide, please. We are based in a little drop-in center in the town. It's a small drop-in, but it is our office and where we use our basement. Please, next slide. And we focus our activity, mostly of them acting on streets, cleaning shooting galleries, connecting the 2 points of drug consumption rooms. We have a mobile consumption room leading by Red Cross in the city. And as well, we have another drug consumption room in a hospital, in a public hospital. But our work is focused on the streets, on the shooting galleries, and ARSU is specializing in clean up these places, getting facilitating new settings, informations, etc., and training about the naloxone as well in the streets. Next slide, please. Our outreach work is centered in contact people who's not in contact with social, the right to be attended by the social administration, peer support, and the most important, we have now a place in the board of the drug policies, local drug policies agenda, like a union. Next slide. And this is the scheme of our project. The exchange machines is in the street, in the middle, in the old town, close to the area who's buying and selling drugs. And our project is the aim to diversify the access points to settings, complementing another ones. We have 6 points to access to the clean material. Like the first is urgencies in the hospital, 24 hours all the year. The pharmacies, we have one of them who is 24 hours and all the days open as well. The drug treatment center, the drop-in center, and at least our machines. It's complementing this accessibility of settings in our city. Next slide, please. You could see in a little picture the 2 machines. One is for recovering to drop all settings, and the other one you can get a new kit with 2 settings, alcohol pads, stereo caps, etc. But at least the next slide, please. We have a budget about 7,500 euros a year of the municipality. At the beginning, it's for one of our activists, 400 euros a month. But finally, we decide to divide this amount and share the opportunity to work on dividing weekly money, 100 euros weekly for one activist. And we have 32 activists now this year. And this is like black money. It's not official, but the municipality accept to pay us with this money every year to share this commitment, not only to manage the machines, fixing or attending, cleaning, etc., is also cleaning the area with all settings on streets and contacting new drug users. Next slide. This is a more best view of the the machine. We have an accident long time ago because a neighbor is stole one of them. And until now, next slide, please. We have to manage with, this is the kit. Next slide, please. We have, this is data from 2001. The blue is delivering sharings, and the pink is recovered sharings. We have now only for the machine 3,000 sharings a year. Next slide. And this is like now because one machine was stolen by the neighbor, and we have to work with this green one. It's only to put the old settings inside, and the other one is who delivery the new kit. You can use with this 5 cents. And when you have the new box, you have a metal coin inside, and then you can replace and replace every time. Otherwise, there are 2 people all day during 2 hours, one in the morning and on the night, giving information to people who is close to the machine or need to have a new kits. Next slide, please. And this is our picture with one of our patrols. These people who is taking care of the machine, cleaning the area, contacting neighborhoods, participating in the municipality meetings about HIV, hepatitis, or how to the ARSO is including in the political drug use in our city. Next slide. This is one of important work who did as well, as I mentioned, to clean the areas and shooting galleries where people is sleeping, people is fixing in, and we have to record all our work in a map every week or every month, have this kind of data and counting all the interventions, etc. Next slide, please. Is in your right, the people setting up the boxes with all the equipment. Then we have to go to the machines and replacing, etc. Next slide. And in the few months ago, the municipality at the same time contract us to deliver in gears and hydroalcoholic gel to the COVID with the lockdown. And we have an authorization to walk to the city during the lockdown because the municipality believes in our network, very necessary during the strict lockdown to continuing working on streets and working in the poorest neighborhoods in our city. Next slide, and I hope this is the only one, the last one. This is an example of our NSP network in Barcelona. 2 years ago with the overdose day in August, and there is people from Reus, Barcelona, and other cities in Catalonia who are now working on strength the NSP network. And I hope that this project, like I said, it's 20 years ago, who are doing this kind of work on the street with this machine, can be an example and inspiring other people. Thank you very much.
Wow, thank you, Antonio. This is in fact a great example on how peers can be an added value, and how some local long-time lasting projects are still doing a great job, and how we all should, pick these so good examples and show that it's not so, it's not against other narratives. This is not a populist narrative. We have, you know, this is concrete and um, I think is astonishing. I saw lots of municipalities that complain with the situation of having lots of materials on the ground. They want to give materials, but then they don't have this second part of the project where peers can in fact be paid and feel useful also for the wider community. This also can break a lot of stigma, but at the same time you were telling us that still one machine was destroyed recently. How would you describe these difficult balances that
Yeah, well, this is in a way in our town in Catalonia mostly there is a decriminalization view. There is some tensions between harm reductionists or drug users union, but it's clear that the decriminalization is the most clear policy in Catalonia.
right? So even though there's some tensions and different perspectives among harm reductionists and users in the wider acceptance of using drugs not as a crime and not as an issue of justice is already well established there. So Antonio, really great example, and I can say maybe the decriminalization is a needed step to then go to other easy ways of peers being involved. Antonio, I don't know if you want to add something.
To finish this reflection, because maybe on Barcelona, it's a more big city, this kind of projects, community projects, it's difficult to undertake because the complexity of different districts, different areas, but it's more easy in the semi-rural areas like Reus, because like a city is one community as everybody, it's easy to communicate and share experiences and everybody knows everybody. And it's maybe one of the key points to to point out. It's like a little community. It's possibilitating this kind of projects, but every neighborhood is a little community as well in a big series. And that's all.
Okay, so thank you for more this insight. So maybe in medium communities where people still know one another and personal relationships can be built and build a network that in fact almost obliges municipalities and to invest in this kind of projects. Yeah, thank you, Antonio.
Thank you very much to you.
Thank you very much.
Nice to.
Matt, I don't know if you're ready to share with us the bath experience. Go ahead, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Rui, and thank you for that really amazing presentation, Antonio. It's really great to see what a really well-developed and mature peer-led needle and syringe program looks like. And I think this use of very diverse strategies, is the way to start to respond to the diverse needs of people who inject drugs. So let me share with you some experience. My name's Matt Southwell. I'm the project executive for EuroNPUD, but I want to speak about some work that EuroNPUD's been supporting, but in my hometown of Bath, which is a small, well, it's relatively small, but very affluent city in the west of England. But as in any affluent community, there are also poor communities that sit alongside it. And sometimes when there's a real disparity of wealth, that can actually make poor communities feel even poorer. the reason we were starting to work in Bath was just reasonably pragmatic. We were doing a project called the Naloxone Access and Advocacy Project, which was a model for peer testing take-home naloxone through focus groups and mystery shopper interventions. Bath was my hometown, so I asked one of our local peers to test the product resources. So we started to build a relationship with the local drug using community. And of course, I was a drug user on that scene, buying drugs on that scene, so I was known by people. At a certain point, we had this very dramatic situation where there is an out-of-town area of Bath, which is one of the big working class estates that sits on the outskirts of Bath. And the challenge was that there is a local pharmacy that's part of the pharmacy needle and syringe program that serves that community. And what I've noticed on the drug scene is that people really wait until they've run out of needles and syringes in the different using houses until someone is sent to go and get needles from the pharmacy exchange or from a different supply. But it's very last minute. And people are often running out and reusing by the point they go and seek additional equipment. And we had this weekend where there was a stock out in the pharmacy needle and syringe program. Now, this area of town is a little way from the fixed site NSP, so it takes maybe half an hour to go into town and then another half an hour to come back again if you can afford the bus fare. So that makes it challenging to get to the fixed site. And the stories we heard after this weekend, now this is a country with well-embedded harm reduction, or at least it claims to have well-embedded harm reduction. Now we have a fixed site and a pharmacy site needle and syringe programs, but due to the stock out, we ended up with people opening bins of disposed needles and syringes, looking for the ones that were sharpest, taking them out of the bin, and the pattern of sharing and reusing that was going on during that weekend really, I think, quite horrified the users themselves about what had actually happened. And it really highlights that if you don't have solid access to harm reduction really well embedded, then you get these potential episodes. Now, Bath has very low HIV prevalence, so that means that the impact was maybe lesser than in areas like Glasgow and Belfast, where we've seen that pattern of street injecting leading to HIV outbreaks. But it was a shock to me, and it was a shock to the peers. I was super frustrated that people cannot manage procurement effectively enough to ensure that our needle and syringe programs remain well stocked. For me, running an NSP for 10 years, we never ran out of stock. And I think if people can't manage procurement in this way, it just shows the lack of priority given to harm reduction. Because for me, this was one of the most urgent tasks. And I know that in my international development work, that in countries where stockouts are even seen as a threat, the government, the UN and other partners get involved in trying to troubleshoot that type of problem. So I think part of the process of stockouts just highlights how low profile harm reduction has become in the UK, as we've seen this 15-year decline of what was the famed British model. So as a result of this, I spoke to local drug suppliers, local peers. And when I speak drug suppliers, I'm not talking international drug barons. I'm talking what we call friendship suppliers, or a supplier is a more friendly term for dealer. It's a less demonized term. These are people who have drug dependency themselves. They're users on a daily basis, and they fund their drug taking in part by turning over maybe a quarter of an ounce or a 1/16 of an ounce, relatively small amounts of drugs that they buy. So maybe 60 to 100 pounds that they're spending, and then selling that in smaller pieces. And that's how they fund their drug taking. And in Bath, much of that process takes place in people's houses. We also have mobile suppliers who deliver, but still there are peers who let their houses then be used as the place where drugs can be taken. There is also one area we found in Bath, 5 minutes from in fact, 50 yards from the front of one of our biggest supermarkets. There's a bush where homeless drug users go to inject in public. And this is one of the richest cities in Bath, in the UK, and we have public injecting drug use. So what we decided was that actually, if we could get drug suppliers holding the equipment and these peer leaders who allowed their houses to be used as using environments, if we could give them equipment and give them stock, then we weren't reliant on one pharmacy and their potential to stock out or not. And also, we've seen even though Bath is very lucky to have a very good training program at Bath University pharmacists, we still see drug users being treated pretty poorly in pharmacy settings, having to walk up to the front counter and ask for needles and syringes in front of everybody else. And again, that becomes a barrier for people to, particularly for people who are more private users. So we started initially with a relatively small scale. We had 3 suppliers, 2 people who had houses and 1 person who was a mobile supplier. And they started to give out needles and syringes to the wider community. And we learnt lessons about that process, and we were doing it as a relatively small scale intervention. And then the first COVID lockdown was announced. We were suddenly very aware that there could be problems in accessing needles and syringes. I think as the current statement of Commission on Narcotic Drugs highlights, very worryingly, harm reduction services in many countries were not deemed as essential services. And so there was a massive withdrawal of services. I mean, I spoke to partners in Germany who maintained their frontline services most of the way through the pandemic. That definitely wasn't the case in the UK. There's been a 25% reduction in the distribution of needles and syringes during the COVID pandemic. Now, that clearly is not matching a reduction in drug use. It probably the very opposite is actually taking place. And notably by involving drug users, and we started to then expand. At the peak, we had 9 different drug users giving out needles and syringes within the community. This is a community of probably about 2,000 drug users in total, so it's a relatively small population. And prior to the drug user initiative, we had 28% coverage of needles and syringes in Bath using fixed site and pharmacy. We think we're close to 100% coverage at this point. And the other shift is, my wife witnessed a drug user arguing with a local pharmacist when he asked for 2 packs of needles and syringes. That's 20 whole syringes. And the pharmacist was arguing with him, why do you need this second pack? We are now giving out boxes of 100 needles and syringes at a time to people. In fact, some of our bigger houses are taking 500, 600, 700 sets of syringes at a time. And we guarantee that we'll deliver within 24 hours if people ring us. And in fact, we often deliver within an hour or within the same day. We've delivered needles and syringes on New Year's Day. We've delivered them at 9:30 at night. Because when peers ring you up and say, we're all sitting in a house with no needles, of course, there is a real concern that you don't want people to be sitting in that house with no needles, because we know how that goes and the risk that that provides. So we're now giving out probably between 700 and 1,000 needles and syringes a week. We have a wide range of equipment. So 1 mil insulin is the primary needles and syringes used by frontline drug users, but we also give out 1 mil barrels, 2 mil barrels, and about 7 or 8 different types of needles. We tend to adjust the range of needles we give. So if someone asks for a particular type, we can then add that to the supply, so it becomes a very tailored delivery system. Alongside the people doing secondary needle and syringe, there is also a delivery service to other active drug users, and that's been promoted within the community. So as I often get calls coming from, this supplier rang me and told me that I should contact you, and there's a sort of, and even those people doing individual delivery, actually, when I talk to them, they say, yes, actually, we often give on needles to other people. And actually, when friends come to my house, and so often the injectors are also taking foil for their friends. And there's a general sense that we're making sure that the houses where people use have access to needles and syringes. Just to sort of highlight some challenges, I think we need to recognize, Bath has a terrible situation of unsterile injection. People have very dirty hands and are using in very dirty environments. We have very high levels of drug-related injuries going on. And I think we need to think about, in small places like Bath, which probably won't be able to afford a drug consumption room, is there a way that, particularly post-decriminalisation, we could start to engage some of these using houses and actually see them as a dispersed, peer-led drug consumption rooms? Now, managing the sterility of these environments is going to be a big case. I'm currently working with local drug services to get about 50 or 60 bin bags that are gradually rotting outside one person's house, removed to take a point of tension away with the local community. But we also have to deal with the fact that in Bath, we have lots of violence on the drug scene because it's not a gang-based scene. So the drug suppliers are often being targeted by criminals who try to break in and steal their drugs. They also face police raids. And so these using houses are very visible because they have smashed windows, broken doors, and lots of things that alienate the local community. I think we need to learn from settings like Amsterdam, where the police have backed off the drug supply scene and allowed it to stabilize and allow it to take on a much more supportive role. There has been a real problem during this period that people have had much less chances to earn money. So classic ways that drug users earn money through begging, shoplifting, sex work, low-level hustles, all of these types of things have gone. That's actually resulted in a degree of peer-on-peer violence as people fight with each other for the very limited resources. And I've been robbed and attacked during this period as well, which also highlights that violence can also impact on peer workers as well. And I think we need to think about some of those, what outreach workers would call lone working, but as peers, we're often not lone working. We're very visible people who are known to the drug scene, and we're trying to manage our relationships. But interestingly in Bath, because it's such a small drug scene, when people rip each other off or when they rob each other, you've still got to carry on interacting with each other. So one of the situations after I was attacked was actually to mediate with the guy who attacked me and talk to him about why it had happened, and so that we could be cool alongside each other and carry on dealing with the situation. The risk otherwise, if you fall out with people and you confuse your role delivering secondary NSP with your role buying drugs, where you might get ripped off, those two roles can't be conflated. You have to understand that you operate as a drug user on the drug scene. Sometimes you might get ripped off. You also deliver secondary NSP, and that should not be conditional on your relationship with people, where you might have hassles and hustles. I think we have to understand that that's the nature of the very marginalized drug scene, and particularly when the drug scene is under huge pressure as it is right now. The other big challenge we've had is police action. So we had 2 high-level suppliers in Bath. The police took out the better of the 2. And now purity has gone from 50% to 30% to 18%. Now, that in itself creates huge challenges for the community. So look, I think what Bath has shown is that when peers come together, we can scale up the response, we can scale up the quality, and we can use that as a platform to also deliver peer-to-peer naloxone, safer injecting advice, wound care, and then wider access into services. Thank you.
Well, again, thank you, Mr. This is so rich presentation on so many important issues, since simple things as language, like friendly supplier, to the proximity and tailored intervention that only peer knowledge can provide. It's really interesting to see these developments and to see how transition to a DECRIM and how the places where users are already using can be, updated or have some kind of intervention that will cost probably much less than a brand new drug consumption room, and it's probably more cozy and more friendly to users. I will leave for the end the questions to Matt, and would follow straight to Emilia Piermartini. Emilia, hi, nice to see you.
Hi, nice to see you all. Thank you for this invitation, and thank you to EuroNPUD and everyone. I'm Emilia Piermartini from CASO Organizados, the Portuguese drug user union we have in Portugal. We are more active in Porto, but we also are in the whole nation, Lisbon and Viseu. I'm here to talk about our peer-to-peer distribution of needles and syringes and harm reduction tools we have made during the pandemic and we are still making. I just want to say that this distribution was made mostly by Rui Salvador, that can't be here, and I'm speaking about his activities. So, as we know, in Portugal, there have been a huge drug policy reform, but from 2001. But still nowadays, we can see how people who use drugs are struggling because policies and practices are lacking of focusing on how we are fundamental for drug policies and harm reduction and advocacy. This was particularly seen so during the pandemic, because due to lockdown, a lot of outreach teams weren't able to reach territories, and so officials needles and syringe program were stopped, and this was affecting our community. Due to these needs and due to our continued contact with the territory, Updash and Saber Comprender, we were able to reach these same territories and make a huge distribution of harm reduction tools. Namely, not only with the exits we made like weekly, but also thanks to EuroNPUD campaigns like Super Don't Punish, International Overdose Awareness Days, the international campaign for the elimination of violence against women who use drugs. And we were able to distribute, just to give you some numbers, more than 3,200 kits, 3,000 wipes, 2,000 condoms, 200 surgical masks, 120 loops, 100 aluminum foils, 50 crack pipes that are a new entry, and 5 naloxone. If we have to talk about naloxone, we have to make clear that in Portugal it's not legal to carry on intravenous naloxone, but we had nasal naloxone, and thanks to this, it was possible to spread this in the community. It's what I want to focus on. It's not just about on numbers, but also about the contact. What we were able to do is to maintain the strong contact with communities and with our peers that live these communities. And so we were able to reach directly, but not only, people who use intravenous, who do people who do intravenous use of drugs. So directly because we are them, but also because thanks to our awareness and sensibilization campaign, we were spreading the importance of carry harm reduction tools, even if you are not going to use them, because they would always be needed in the community. And even the more marginalized ones, like people who use intravenous drugs. Also, this was part of the empowerment we made between us, among us, with the communities, because we know that the communities is able to read the reality, and we are able to speak for ourselves. And this was always one of the first objective we had. We also collected a lot of testimonies of how this lack of services was affecting the community, and the lack of broader look from the politics were affecting the communities, because of course the lockdown and the pandemic at all has just showed more how this society is in crisis and how we have to show up. Also thanks to the maintaining of contact, not just to contact, not just the maintaining of services, but human contact, because our community is often isolated and marginalized, and the lockdown has just affected this more and more. So what I wanted and what I think it's our best practice is to build and maintain partnerships with other organizations and in the community, and of course with our people who use drugs and among ourselves. So thank you, Rui, and thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Emilia. Thank you very much for this, also very clear example on how even a small structure, a small organization with not a big structure can, in collaboration with other NGOs and with the state, can bring harm reduction to the places where users really are. And also bring the information of those needs you can find there to the NGOs that provide harm reduction. Essentially, I would say just two things to end the story. I don't know if you said this, but in the end, CASO didn't need to do much distribution because there was a distribution from NGOs, and now with this experience obliged by COVID, we entered the. Do you care to talk about that, Emilia?
Yes. I mean, as you were saying, now things are almost back to the big normal, this big elephant in the room. But we were able to enter directly in the relationships and with NGOs and with states. So we are now part of the distribution. And before the pandemic, this wasn't a reality. So we were able to show how this is important, because even with all the organizations and NGOs, we can reach people the other organizations are reaching. It's not for lack of will, it's because we have capabilities and we have power to do this. And I hope I know this is going to continue with this big and good work.
Thanks, Emilia. It was really great to show, powers that we could do this, and to enter now the official platform that will receive for free all these materials to give to our peers. Thanks, Emilia. In the end, there will be more questions. And last but not least, my friend Tom will be sharing a long tradition of harm reduction led by peers. Thank you, Tom. The floor is yours. Please unmute yourself. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Tom from Danish Drug Users Union. I've been working 21 years for the Syringe Patrol in Copenhagen since 1997 until 2018. The patrol still exists. I'm now an old man, 64. I still use heroin, and I've been doing that for 40 years. I still contribute with weekly dinner and some accountancy work. I also have a healthy life. I do badminton and swim and bicycling every week. We began the patrol to improve the image of people who use drugs in 1997. We cleaned up on the drug scene in Vesterbro, Copenhagen. I think we got the idea to set up the patrol from other user organizations. I'm sorry, I cannot remember from where. The patrol have existed for several years. Many different members have were able to volunteer, and we are a kind of media darlings and media lovers. I have been around with several journalists and students on my patrol. It gives us a chance to explain why people who use drugs are nice people, not only thieves and robbers, as they are often portrayed. In 2006, we began a formal cooperation with people living about the drug scene. We founded a group called Barsebäck, which was this group, the Syringe Patrol, got financed for the first time directly. In 2007 and 2008, we received 50,000 euro each year from the Copenhagen municipality. Thus, we were able to offer people lunch and cigarettes as a means of payment. Also, as an important side effect remark, this sum enabled us to organize an international 2008. This was the first time Input held a meeting since they were set up in 2007. In 2009 and 10, we received money for the last time from the municipality. It's 25,000 euro a year. From 2010, we continued the work without direct financing. However, we get funding to run our organization. We are currently in big problems due to domestic changes in funding policy. However, we have been well funded. The patrol is still very popular. Since 2010, we have had drug consumption rooms in Copenhagen. This have reduced the waste collected with 75%. Hotels, residents near to the central station are very happy with our patrol. 2 times a week, we are doing the task, and is still doing it. Mainly to show our presence and to come into contact with people who use drugs, people living on the street and taking care of themselves. We are also represented in council with local inhabitants will focus on the task picking up wasted syringes. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Tom. Very, very, very good to always remember the history on Denmark and how things sometimes look a little different on the north of Europe with so much investment directly going to users and with so much real investment on combating stigma. In the chat, I was reading someone, saying, thank you, Tom, for saying you're a user of heroin and for, by your life be showing that there's no stereotype. We are a very diverse community. People that use drugs are not just a caricature, not just the junkie caricature. I also would like to highlight this kind of how you work with the municipality, with council of inhabitants, and then how you enter not only the users, our field, our informal networks, but also how you were able to build relationships with more formal institutions, and how you were recognized by also doing that effort. So really interesting example. And for the future, Tom, how do you see in Denmark that has already so much history and so much to give us for the future? How are things there?
As Emilia explained, it's difficult to make money because people are not so many on the streets, and as also was told earlier, that's people have difficulty getting money for buying heroin or what they use. So yeah, during this pandemic.
Emergency pocket money, I don't know, but somehow that reality is everywhere, and it's a bit overwhelming for users. Okay, so
I have a little thing I will add. In 2009, we sent down equipment for a syringe patrol in Macedonia to Vito in Skopje, and they began the work, and we got a good response that they have continued the work on picking up equipment on the streets down there. So,
So it's not a novelty. It's not new that peer work really works, and I guess that all this time doing this kind of actions brought us to this kind of moments where the voice of users is really beginning to be heard, and hopefully we'll have the ability to take care of our own health and build our own health.
Can I add as a last comment, please? From next year, we are not able to sure that we have money for continue our work and can pay our house rent and have our place here. So we are having contact with parliaments, politicians, and so we can get an appointment or can see how the money shall come from next year.
But still, all this time, showing how we can do things and solve things, and still you can only think 1 year ahead. Do you feel that by now you should have a stronger and sustainable structure?
Yeah, I think so. We have been funded for 4 years last time, from 2017 to now until the end of 21. So yeah, it's a new situation.
Yeah,
this structure is dead now. Yeah.
So you're reinventing yourselves, and hopefully you're trying to get an agreement of another cycle of 4 years, or
this is not possible any longer. So
no.
Yeah, the funding policy is changing, as I mentioned earlier. Yeah.
Okay, so this is really sad news to hear.
Something will show up.
Yes, yeah, we're survivors against all odds. So any help from EuroNPUD, or support in any way we can, you can count with us. And maybe now I would open the floor to some questions.
Need to launch, need to launch the course first.
Sorry?
Need to launch the course.
Sorry. This is a surprise I told you in the beginning. So Matt would be talking about the experience in Bath, and now talking about EuroNPUD course on these issues. Go ahead, Matt, sorry.
No problems, Rory. I'll be relatively brief on this. So this is one of the new courses on peer-led harm reduction that EuroNPUD has developed. And we're delighted to be able to show the basis of this course, or some examples from this course. Let me explain how this model works. So essentially we have developed we have a project called Reduction. The topics we have undertaken so far, we launched last week the naloxone saves lives course. This week I'm launching the Safer Injecting course, and we're looking for money to develop a course called Stimulant Harm Reduction, which will be developed as a joint project between EuroNPUD and the Latin American network of people who use drugs. The course model is essentially a PowerPoint presentation that guides a training, a one-day training course. It is supported with a trainer's guide that guides the trainers about how to use the presentation. The intention is that peer trainers deliver the course, and they use their personal examples, the examples and experience of their community, the work of their drug user groups, to illustrate the course. But the course provides the structure, the facts, the training model, and makes sure that everything is compliant with global and European standards. I'm sure many of you will recognize the design approaches coming from Marley from Metzineres, the wonderful women's drug user project in Barcelona. And we're delighted to have this sort of celebratory approach of people who use drugs while talking about difficult technical issues. We're not trying to reduce the challenges of these issues, but we understand, as this webinar shows, that when we empower people who use drugs and celebrate people who use drugs, the outcomes are far more exciting than demonization and criminalization. The PowerPoint model is set up so that although the design is set behind, the text is all in typed form, and this allows for translation into other languages, as does the training handbook as well. And the training handbook also includes programs, knowledge tests, case studies, evaluation forms, which are all designed to ensure that peer training meets exactly the same standards as professional training, but has the added value of being delivered with peer knowledge. And this celebratory approach continues. So highlighting some techniques like this one of protected using spaces, where we're really starting to draw this very specific advice that we give to drug users about how to manage their injecting in often complex environments. So just to give you an overview of the toolkit, it meets expert guidance standards. So you'll see that when you go through the guidance, the PowerPoint early on, it indicates which UN guidelines this is endorsed with. And also very importantly, and thank you to Aura Roig for doing this part of the development work, we have also, one of the reasons we've slowed the launch down of this project was that we wanted to make sure it was fully compliant with the learning from the EuroCIDA project, which is an EU-funded project on safer injecting, which has really been a very bottom-up development coming out of Marseille, being tested in different parts of Europe. And I think it's an excellent resource, and we're very happy that our course is a peer-compliant, peer-integrated version of that approach. We're also understanding that it's not just what you technically know, it's also how you deliver it is part of the key issue. One of the key learning is that drug user groups have privileged access. We can reach our community and engage with our community in this privileged way. And the last session of the course talks about how do we get needles and syringes out there into our community, and promotes this model that we call secondary needle and syringe program, or 2NSP, which is essentially peer-led needle and syringe program. The bath pilot that I showed you was deliberately intended as a pilot. So we now have Richard Pop, who is an ex-drug user living in Bath, who is meeting with the various drug users and drug suppliers who are part of the Bath pilot, and also our professional partners, to document the learning and experience from that pilot. Importantly, there will also be case studies of EuroNPUD's work, CATNPUD's work, and CASO's work that will sit alongside the UK example. The reason it's framed like this is the funding is coming from UK, but we always try to use work done in one country to draw lessons for the wider drug using community. Yeah, so this is actually a model from Eurocider originally, but reinterpreted by Marley. And then just the final part before I finish is, we want this course to be used as broadly and widely as possible. We will help groups develop it and translate it within Europe. If you're outside Europe, then, and you have funding to develop and an interest to develop this course for your own context, and you have the resources and capacity to do that, then again, we're very happy to see that happening. However, there is a condition, and the condition of it being open source and free is that it must be delivered by, training must be delivered by peer trainers. That can either be a pair of peer trainers or a peer trainer co-training with a professional partner. The audience must also be or include peers. So either it can be used by drug user groups to train their constituency, their members, or it may be part of a peer harm reduction partnership. Because what we really recognize is that when peers train, and then peers and professionals train together, that has a really powerful stigma busting effect. So we want this course to be widely used, but we require partners to sign a partnership with an agreement with us that guarantees how it will be used. And then if we're clear that either it will be peer-led or genuine meaningful participation, then we're delighted to license this to be used on an open source basis by other partners. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt, and well, and thank you all speakers for so brilliant examples. I was going through the chat, and I was well, I will highlight that Buff Cameron is thanking Tom for he took the learnings from 2007 meeting and transferred this knowledge to Belfast. Also, Christine is putting questions on how can in the same region between Sweden and Denmark how we see so many different, so that the approach is so different. And a question addressed to Portugal, or why is naloxone just for 2 years? Christine was also rather surprised by this. So I would open the floor to any comments that either speakers, either one of you that wishes to reply or comment on this. Okay. Am I here?
Really, just to say one thing, I mean, looking at Buff's comment about how the BrugerForeningen situation led to an inspiration of the Belfast peers also developing peer needle patrol and calling it the Copenhagen model. In international development, I'm constantly talking about the BrugerForeningen model and sharing it as a case study and example. So that's why I'm so pleased to have Tom here today celebrating that work, because it's really been a real case study. And the fact that Tom and the BrugerForeningen group learnt it from another drug user group in another area just shows the dynamism of drug user organizing.
True, Matt. It's you know, it's an ongoing struggle, you know, to have our voice heard, and you know, for a long time, even though we show that we can do still the hypocrisy and you know, the laws made by people that don't really know, and many times just looking at us also as not as criminals, at least in Portugal, but pathologizing all drug use is also the new box. Looking at the chat, and Andrea asks for if there's a possibility to create a needle patrol in London. I think this is for you, Matt.
Look, I think the key is responding to need. So, for example, in Myanmar, where the Kachin drug user network is widely using needle patrol, partly because the local community keep pulling the disposal machines out, or the disposal sites out of the ground, so then needles are thrown all over the ground, and drug users are constantly going out, picking them up, trying to take away this point of social conflict. And I think we've seen these two different forms. One is a peer cleanup operation, and the other is a peer needle patrol. So the cleanup operation is often a very good start before you do secondary needle and syringe program, because it's a way of going into the local community and saying, look, the first thing we're going to do is sort out your community problem. Let's clear it up. And sometimes the local community works with local drug users to do that, and that can be very effective. And then, as Tom described, a maintenance project of an ongoing needle patrol. And knowing, for example, that BrugerForeningen had a telephone number where the local community could ring up the drug users and say, hey guys, there's a problem in this area. It changes the nature of drug users from being the problem to being the solution. I think that's why it's so exciting. So definitely make sure you have a need. Don't just do it for the sake of it, but where there's a need, we know this works really effectively.
Yeah, for sure. Identifying that need in London and finding the places, and then maybe work from there. I mean, Andrea. Richard Pope asks for any of the panelists to comment on the importance of having support from local authorities in developing this kind of secondary needle exchange programs.
What I think is that I'm from Italy, so you have two looks that I can describe you. So in Portugal, I think nowadays anyone could say that decriminalization was the wrong choice. So, but we have to continue fighting, because it's so easy for authorities to just forget what we are still missing, and it's so easy for isolated individuals in politics to just make their own and don't work for the next step that it's needed. Here in Italy, we have a completely different situation, and it's just so difficult to carry peer-to-peer programs and stuff like this. And there is a situation that it's very different between regions, and we strongly need that the politics became aware of what people who use drugs in Italy need. And I don't know, I think it's always a dialogue. It has to be continued, and it's fundamental, because without this, we are just kicked off the scene that is ours.
Yeah, and thanks, Emilia. Anyone would care to comment on the importance of, you know, local authorities and the state step up and really invest in this kind of programs?
Yeah, look, I mean, just to say that we were able to do our work because we have no funding whatsoever. In fact, the only funding we've had has been small grants from one small grant from EuroNPUD. So we have relied on a local drug service being willing to step up and work with us in partnership. And we really like to thank our partners at Developing Health and Independence, which is a regional drugs provider. And so the fact that we've been able to work through this together has been very important. We are now placing a significant challenge to them, which is that the distribution of equipment has gone up by 3 times in our local area. So now there's a big challenge about what equipment we're giving out. Can we afford to give spoons? Now, how do we manage all these types of issues? I think those are positive challenges to manage. We're also very grateful to the local director of public health to writing to West Country Respect, to the local drug user group, to thank us for our contribution during this time. We are also starting to try to say, look, can you not see how badly you're spending money locally? We have 2, 3 or 4 drug users, people who inject drugs, who end up in hospital for 2 to 3 months each year with septicemia because of the lack of sterile injecting. Now, we could afford to have a full peer-led outreach team, even if we just reduce that by 50%. So at the moment, we tend to not do prevention and spend far too much money clearing up the mess because we don't do good prevention work.
Yeah, thank you. I think it's important that we struggle, like Emilia was saying, an ongoing struggle to ask politicians and professionals to have the courage and also keep ourselves really open to a dialogue, and this kind of political dialogues will probably allow us to ask for more accountability, and like Matt was saying, that will leave the authorities in a position they will be forced by evidence to support maybe, and so cooperating with allies is always a basic good strategy. Having some allies in the field will facilitate this pressure on the authorities to fund us. Yes, so I'm not seeing any other specific questions to anyone. So I don't know if anyone cared to complement and add some issues to these questions of secondary needle exchange. I think it's a really good strategy to show powers how peers can do so well some of the things they cannot, and I think that in fact maybe pandemic situation and crisis can now it's being really tough. For instance, I live in the interior of Portugal, and in a decriminalized country, and law enforcement now is not being so pedagogical as in the first confinement. Lots of friendly facilitators, each week one goes down, and everyone is called to testify. If you have your phone number, you are already implied in this. Yeah, thanks, Tessa. Tessa is from Belgium, and she also works and developed a really strong project with peers and with Tony and Anton and Seabuddy. So I would also like to highlight this project. Tessa is also highlighting how important it is to work together. Okay, Emilia and Matt, I think, well, thank you for for this, amazing, informal, but with lots of rich information from these different experiences. And see you all in next week. So final comments.
Yeah, just to maybe say next week, we have the last in this series, and we're super excited because this is the very first time we've we've contributed to many webinars, but this is the first time we've run our own webinar series. And I really hope we've shown that really peers do work and peer work really works. EuroNPUD was delighted to take part with INPUD in a project and two sex worker networks in a project led by Médecins du Monde. And this project was called the Global Peer Work Consultation. So 15 focus groups were held in 13 countries with sex workers and drug users who were doing peer work with their communities. Rui and I both ran focus groups in the UK and Portugal. The facilitators of those focus groups came together, shared their feedback from all around the world, and came up with 5 key areas, and then 70 absolutely top stakeholders from the global community, from donors, from governments, from top NGOs, from researchers, all came together and discussed that with us in focus groups run by our community, or by ours and the sex workers community. It was a great collaboration. So what is happening next week is basically the public feedback from that closed process. And this is really significant because the global AIDS strategy that was passed a month ago sets a target that 30% in future, 30% of the HIV response should be delivered by community-led organizations. In our sector, that means drug user rights networks. Now, in no country is that current level of investment taking place, but it's a very significant commitment, and the global AIDS strategy is expected to be delivered in every country, not just those in the global south. So we can all start going to our governments and saying, thank you so much for signing up to the global AIDS strategy. We're really excited to see that you've signed up to a commitment to a 30% level of community-led involvement. Can we talk to you about how you're going to fund us to actually achieve that outcome? And that's a key area of advocacy for all of us to take back to our governments in the next period. So I really invite you to come along next week, hear Judy Chang present about some really excellent research that INPUD has done into the use of peer work in the global south. I will share the feedback from the various focus groups so you understand what's happening. And then Ernst Wise from MDM will introduce the global peer work consultation and show a cartoon model that essentially allows us to give the feedback while protecting the confidentiality of the dialogue that took place. So really hope you'll come along and join us next week in the last of this series.
Yeah, totally agree. Emilia had to leave, and she says thank you all, and guess this is it for today. It will be truly a great webinar next week, finalizing this series and giving some feedback on this global consultation, so that we all ask for our 30%. And so, yeah, have a safe week. Thank you all. Stay safe. Thank you.